Welcome back, welcome back. Well, what is religion all about? A question that's been asked right back to the Crusades and before. And now, with the death and killing in the name of God, we ask ourselves, is religion about love and tolerance, or is it sometimes, or more often perhaps, about hate and intolerance? Joining me now, the Times Middle Eastern correspondent and author of The Spiders of Allah, The Travels of an Unbeliever on the Front Line of Holy War, James Hyder, the Anglican vicar also, and TV presenter Peter Owen Jones, and Imam Ajmal Mazroum. A trio of all the talents there. Let me just start with the question where most religions teach respect and love, as we were saying there, and love for your neighbour in particular. Why then do Protestants and Catholics, e.g. Ireland, Jews and Muslims, Sikhs and Hindus, why do they all find it so difficult to get on? I mean, in this atmosphere that should be peace and goodwill, love and respect. Why are those clashes in existence? Let's start with you, James.
In the Middle East, it's obviously, I think what you're seeing in Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians is a nationalistic conflict framed by religions. And I think that the religious edge gives it a certain level of intolerance. There seems to be very little compromise on the fringes of societies. I mean, if you take your average person from Tel Aviv and your average person from Ramallah, they've probably got a huge amount in common. They're sort of normal, ordinary people. But on the fringes, you have the Hamases, you have the Jewish settlers, and there's no room for compromise in there.
Peter, I mean, do you feel that that Christianity, your faith, other faiths, are failing in this attempt to produce love and respect?
I think what James has said is absolutely right and cannot be denied. And I think what is emerging is a crisis for monotheism. This has been emerging for quite some time, for Judaism, for Islam, for Christianity, for the great three monotheistic faiths. Having come back from the Middle East, I was consistently told by Jewish Orthodox rabbis and by Muslim imams that we are men of peace. This is a religion of peace. But there is a great deal of difference between being a religion of peace and espousing non-violence. I think monotheism, all the great monotheistic faiths and the leadership of those faiths now need to stand back and say, are we just content to be men of peace who can be provoked into violent action? Or are we going to follow the teaching that is inherent within our faith and adopt non-violence? And that is the question that now needs to be put to all Christians, all Muslims, and all Jews. There is no way around that, I'm afraid.
Well, let me put the question, first of all, to Ajmal.
Yes. I think the idea that religion has contributed to the problems of the world is rather shallow. I think religions have combined a great deal of eagerness and zeal to make the world peaceful. What would we call the Maoists who have been fighting in Nepal? What would we call the Basque separatists in Spain? Religious too motivated to go to heaven or hell for that matter. I think we at the end of the day are motivated by us being human. I think that's the problem, not the religion. Greed, nationalistic fervor, like James has already said, political interference, corruption, all those lead to corruption and problems on this earth, unpeaceful ways of dealing with things. Religion inherently is peaceful, wants its followers to be peaceful, and if people followed those religions as the religions teach, for example, if Moses was alive today, Muhammad was alive today, and Jesus was alive today, he would be abhorred, or they would be abhorred by the behavior of some of the followers. So to blame religion for the failings of human is rather shallow.
Is that rather shallow, or do you put more blame? I mean, do you think that religion, I mean, you're not a believer, are you?
No,
right?
No.
I mean, do you think that religion, in fact, helps these problems or hinders them? Makes things better, makes things worse?
I mean, I think you're right to a large degree. It is human nature, and I think it is partly human nature to believe in these things. But I think religion often provides a vector an absolutism that you cannot answer. If God has said something, who are you to argue with it?
How do you answer the question of the Marxist and the whole of the Soviet bloc that came about? It was not motivated by religion.
Well, I mean, there is a political theory that Marxism, Leninism were successors to the Judeo-Christian ideology. No, that idea that you can, there's a better world coming if you can just sacrifice yourself now for it. That was inherent in communism, in Marxism, that, you know, if the workers fight, struggle, whatever, and then one day there'll be a better world. It's a Judeo-Christian idea that there will be a heaven one day if you can just sacrifice yourself for it now.
I think
that is inherent in Marxism.
That's a problem with the argument that you're presenting, and that is, firstly, you're projecting religion as a definition, or a definition of religion which is very Eurocentric, your experience of Europe. That is not necessarily the experience of the rest of the world, number one. Number two, religion isn't the same as you understand it, for me as Muslim. It's not the same. And thirdly, yes, you're right, there could be other motivations, but why blame religion for it? Let's look at the world at large.
What has happened in every war is that there has been far too much silence from the religious institutions against the acts of violence that are taking place.
But Peter, let's be fair. In the Middle East, right, for example, majority of the Middle Eastern countries are ruled by dictators and despots who would put any religious person behind bars, kill them, hang them, or throw them away and banish them. So these are the individuals who are dictators and despots who don't allow religions to flourish, and you are saying religion is therefore responsible. No, dictators and despots are responsible for the problems we see in the Middle East today.
I'm afraid, but underpinning despots and dictators will be completely ruthless when it comes to maintaining their position. They will use whatever they can.
And they don't use religion for sure.
I would have to disagree.
They do sometimes.
They don't. Nobody. Which of the religious authorities in the Middle East use religion as a pretext to subjugate, to put 100,000 prisoners of conscience, such as in Egypt, to banish their own political opponents, such as in Tunisia? Which of the dictators and despots use religion for this? None.
What about Iran?
Iran is not part of the Middle East. We're talking about Middle East. Iran is an extension of a particular different part of the world.
We're talking about the world.
Yeah.
But Iran is one isolated example amongst 20 other Middle Eastern states who are absolutely ruthless. And I agree with you, Iran doesn't have what I call free and fair democratic society. It's an autocratic society, imposition of religion and religious interpretation by a particular group of people. But that is not to say, therefore, religion of 90% of the rest of the Muslim world should be brushed by the behavior of some Iranian clerics.
Back to you, James.
I think the problem with religion is you have this huge authority from God that people can't question, that is exploited by religious groups for their own ends, and it's I mean, you're saying it's not religion itself, it's religious interpretations. I mean, try explaining that subtlety to, you know, a Mahdi army militiaman in Sadr City with an RPG, and it's not going to make any difference.
I have to disagree with James. I think there have been some extraordinary religiously spiritual figures throughout history who have countenanced non-violence and who have countenanced the fact that we should love our enemies and that we should live in peace. I think there is good religion and I think there is bad religion. And I think we need to distinguish between the two. And I think to cast all religion as saying within it, it is essentially bad, I think that is simply dismissing the instances where religion has been actually responsible for great acts of peace and great acts of love.
That's true, but I think the problem with religion is that it's irrational, and you're expecting people to behave rationally based on an irrational belief. I mean,
that's precisely the problem. The problem is what you're doing is you're straitjacketing a group of people who have a belief that they're irrational. I think that's an unfair statement to make.
No, I'm not saying they're irrational. I'm saying the belief itself is irrational. There's no factual basis for it. There's no evidence for it.
That's what your understanding is, but they believe there is. So that is in itself an unprovable position. But I think what you have said, Peter, is absolutely spot on, and that is religions have played a great role in bringing people together, creating individuals who are conscientious and good citizens. I've just come back from Lebanon myself. Guess what, in Lebanon, the factional fighting is not because of religion only, it's because of interference from other countries. Syria, Iran, and America. Believe it or not, if it wasn't interference from those countries, those communities have lived together quite peacefully before the interference began.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much indeed. There's a campaign in Britain at the moment on a number of buses, and it says it's an atheist campaign, and it says there's probably no God, so stop worrying and enjoy your life. Alternatively, there's the version that says God is love. Well, we recorded that conversation about God and so on earlier on, but now we return at the end of the program to the subject we talked about at the beginning, the subject of President Obama. He and his team, of course, have already started work, as we've covered earlier on, and major challenges in trade like Gaza and the economy. But perhaps hardest of all, some say, would be meeting the high hopes, the huge high hopes that his election has raised, not just in America, but all around the world. And I'm joined now by a Republican voter, a political commentator, Charlie Wolfe, to find out how long he thinks that the honeymoon will last. Honeymoons tend to come to an end, don't they, Charlie?
Yes, very much so.
But at the moment, there's no sign of an end to it at the moment, of course.
No, we're in a funny situation. We've gone from 8 years of what I called Bush derangement syndrome, where President Bush couldn't do anything right, and everyone passed the facts. Now we're going into what I call Obama delusion syndrome. It's almost like the Dianification of Obama. So the expectations are beyond high, and it's based on a fantasy, and ultimately these sort of fantasies just come to a crashing halt. Think of Tony Blair. One of the papers over here had a picture of Obama waving in the parade, and right next to it was almost the exact same pose 10 years ago of Tony Blair walking up Downing Street, and we know how that all ended. I mean, he has everyone's support, especially the Republican Party. If you look over the past couple weeks, right now the Republicans, the conservatives, seem happier with him than a lot of the far left. Appointments of leaving Bob Gates on it, defense, Hillary Clinton, Jim Jones at national security. These are very pragmatic decisions that have a lot of us feeling very comfortable, whereas the anti-war crowd are kind of going, wait, these are warmongers and what have you. Why did you put them in place? As far as, for instance, even his economic package, it was Harry Reid who said, I don't work for the president. So he's going to find more trouble from his own party than he may find from the Republicans.
But do you think he's in the sort of position, well, if you were betting on the election in 4 years' time, would you expect him to still be riding high?
That's a hard one to say. There's a good chance of it. Bill Clinton, as you know, went through a lot of scandal and seemed to have made things, and came back 4 years later. Even George Bush, to be fair, as controversial as that presidency was, and as much as people supposedly didn't like him, John Kerry 4 years ago did not have anything to offer, and George Bush, they felt still more secure with George Bush, and he got back in and did the full 8 years. So it is still very possible.
But that's the interesting position where we're going to be looking at that in the next few weeks, hopefully with your presence on several of these occasions. But as you say, a honeymoon is going ahead at the moment, and everybody around the world wants him to do well.
Can I also just very quickly,
Yeah.
I think Michelle Obama, and I really didn't like her when the campaign first started, so far seems to be just a model of graciousness. If he can live up to her and his children, then he'll have done pretty well. So far, they have set an absolute fantastic example.
A family presidency.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, we hope that indeed, whether we're Democrats or Republicans or independents, that indeed the president will be successful and that the honeymoon will continue for some time anyway. Join us again next week when it should certainly still be going then for another Frost Over the World. Goodbye for now.